All right, so we're diving deep today into how to improve your English conversation skills.
Yeah.
We've got this awesome guide, English Conversation Starters and Strategies, and
Oh, the good one.
it's packed with, well, it's kind of funny because you would think it'd be all about, like,
Vocab, right
yeah,
now.
big words, fancy grammar, but
Not really.
no. Some of the best tips are about just being a good human.
Exactly. Like, think about a time you met someone and just instantly felt comfortable.
Yeah.
They probably weren't even saying anything impressive, right? It's all about that genuine smile.
Oh, for sure.
That open body language, making eye contact.
So basically, I can ditch my thesaurus and just, like,
Being approachable.
yeah, just be a friendly face.
That's a huge part of it.
The guide even says to start simple, like a warm hello or even just
Commenting on something around you.
right. They had some really creative examples in there.
I love that approach because it shows you're present in the moment. Like, this coffee shop is always so busy, it instantly creates a connection.
Yeah, you're acknowledging that shared experience.
Plus, it kind of invites a longer response than just...
Yeah, like a yes or no.
Exactly. It opens the door for a real conversation.
So it's like an invitation instead of a dead end.
Exactly.
The guide calls them observational openers, which I guess makes sense.
Makes sense.
But once you get past that initial hello, then it's all about,
listening.
yeah, active listening, which
So important.
it's harder than it sounds.
It really is, and it goes way beyond just nodding your head.
Right.
When you actively listen, you're showing respect.
You're making the other person feel
Heard and seen.
like their words matter,
Exactly, and that makes people want to open up even more.
which is kind of the whole point of a good conversation, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got the groundwork.
The foundation.
Yeah, the foundation. But what about those different situations you find yourself in? Like, how do you actually navigate a conversation at, say, a party versus a business meeting?
Right, because those are totally different vibes.
The guide breaks it down, starting with those everyday encounters, just running into people.
Casual stuff.
Yeah, what stood out to you there?
Well, the asking about their connection strategy was really interesting.
Okay.
Perfect for parties or networking events, Like, you could ask someone, how do you know the host?
What brings you here?
Exactly. You instantly have something in common to talk about.
It's so simple,
The
effective.
Yeah.
There's even an example in the guide where that one question
Yeah.
leads to two people realizing they both love rock climbing.
No way.
Yeah, it's crazy.
See, it's more than just small talk.
Uh,
It's strategically finding common ground.
it's like a treasure hunt for connection.
I like that.
And then another tactic for social settings that I liked was just commenting on the event itself. Like,
Music's great, or...
these snacks are delicious.
Yeah. It's
that-
simple, relatable,
Yeah, everyone can agree on that.
and when people feel comfortable, they're more likely to open up.
Makes sense, but how do we transition that to, like, a more formal setting, Like a business conference.
Ooh, yeah, where first impressions are everything.
Exactly. The guide suggests going beyond just a plane.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, like, try something more specific. Like,
It was a pleasure to meet you. Your presentation was really insightful.
oh, that's good.
It shows you were actually paying attention,
And you're not just,
saying the same thing to everyone,
right, you're genuinely interested.
which can go a long way in a professional context.
And maybe even open doors for collaborations.
For sure. The guide also talks about asking insightful questions about their work.
Like showing you value their expertise.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got in-person stuff down, but we can't forget about
Online.
the online world. I mean, it's everywhere.
It really is.
And it's a great way to practice English, especially if you're,
A little shy, maybe?
yeah, more introverted.
You can take your time, think things through.
The guide actually highlights how valuable it is to, like, respond to posts.
Yeah, or ask questions in forums.
It's a low-pressure way to get involved.
It is, but you have to remember that online communication has its own, set of rules.
Oh, yeah, totally.
It's easy to misinterpret tone.
Because you're missing all those nonverbal cues.
Right, so it's extra important to be clear and respectful.
It's like the Wild West out there sometimes.
Seriously.
So we've covered starting conversations,
That's...
but how do we keep them going? This guide, it really dives into sustaining the conversation.
That's where the magic happens.
Right. And they start by warning us about, well, a trap I fall into all the time.
Oh, tell me.
Asking too many closed-ended questions.
Ah, yes, the dreaded yes or no question.
It's, do you like this weather?
Which gets you a yes or no, and then...
Cricket is. But the guide calls open-ended questions magic, which I love.
Because they are.
Instead of, do you like to travel? You ask.
What's the most fascinating place you've ever been?
Boom. Suddenly the conversation is.
A lot.
You're inviting them to share a story.
And that's what makes conversations memorable, right?
Totally. And it's not just about the questions.
Right.
They emphasize active listening here, too, which we talked about.
It's like level 2 of active listening.
Yeah, it's not just hearing the words. It's truly understanding what the other person is saying.
And responding thoughtfully.
Yeah, and they suggest paraphrasing, like summarizing what you heard, just to make sure you're on the same page.
That's such a good tip. It shows you're really paying attention.
And it can prevent misunderstandings.
Absolutely. It's like you're building this bridge of understanding.
I love that analogy.
But what about those times when we want to speak up, but anxiety gets in the way?
Oh, tell me about it.
That's a real struggle, even for experienced language learners.
The guide's advice here, it's actually really simple.
What is it?
Start small. Don't pressure yourself to jump into these big, complex conversations right away.
Baby steps.
Exactly. Practice with people you feel comfortable with.
And in low-pressure situations...
They also suggest having a few conversation starters ready to go.
Oh, like a cheat sheet.
Yeah, it's like a little safety net.
It can really help with those awkward silences.
And remember, it's not about flawlessly executing a script.
No, it's about connection.
It's about genuine human interaction.
Focus on listening, asking real questions, and sharing your own experiences in a way that connects with what they're saying.
And if you stumble over a word or two,
don't sweat it.
It happens.
It's part of the process.
Mistakes are actually how we learn.
They really are.
So it's about shifting your mindset,
Yeah.
from being afraid of messing up to embracing those mistakes as opportunities to grow.
Absolutely.
So we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive.
We have. It's amazing how much goes into a simple conversation.
We talked about being approachable, using those observational openers,
Yeah.
the power of active listening, how to navigate different situations, and even dealing with anxiety.
And it all comes back to that human connection, right?
Exactly. It's not about being perfect. It's about making an effort, being present, and enjoying the process.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's amazing how much the guide stresses active listening. Like, it's not just a passive thing.
Right. Like, it's got to be active.
Exactly. It's almost like the glue that holds a conversation together.
Yeah, I like how they break down specific techniques for active listening.
Yeah.
Because it's not always obvious.
Like paraphrasing, for instance.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It's like you're taking a mental snapshot of what the other person said and then reflecting it back to them, showing you're really trying to understand.
And it gives them a chance to, clarify if you missed something.
Right. Exactly.
And it can be as simple as saying, so it sounds like you're saying, or...
if I understand correctly.
Yeah, simple phrases like that.
It's a subtle way of saying, I'm with you, keep going.
And you know what else I've noticed? Even nonverbal cues can play a part.
Oh, totally. Things like making eye contact,
Nodding your head.
leaning in a little, those all show you're engaged.
It's like you're sending these little nonverbal messages that say, I'm listening, tell me more.
Exactly.
But beyond active listening, one of the biggest takeaways for me has been those open-ended questions.
They're game changers.
They really are. The guide even calls them magic keys, which I love.
It's a great analogy because they really do unlock the conversation.
Instead of those closed-ended questions that just lead to dead ends.
Right, like, do you like Italian food? Versus, what's your favorite Italian dish and why? Exactly. Suddenly you've got this whole world of possibilities.
They're not just getting information, you're getting a story.
A personal connection.
And speaking of sharing experiences, the guide encourages us to do that too.
Of course, but in a way that relates to what the other person is saying.
Right, it's not just about hijacking the conversation with your own stories.
No, it's about finding those points of commonality.
Those shared interests that can build a connection.
Exactly. If someone's talking about their love of hiking,
You could share a memory about a hike you went on.
it's like weaving your own experiences into the fabric of the conversation.
I like that, creating a richer tapestry.
And it keeps things flowing naturally.
Oh, and speaking of keeping things flowing, we can't forget about body language.
Oh, that's so important.
The guide reminds us to be mindful of our nonverbal cues.
Because they can speak volumes.
Like if you're constantly looking away or fidgeting,
It sends the message that you're not really interested.
which can be a real conversation killer.
For sure. But even with the best body language and open-ended questions, sometimes conversations have to end.
Oh yeah, all good things must come to an end.
And the guide has some tips for that too, like how to exit gracefully.
Without being awkward.
Exactly. Something like, it was great talking to you, but I promised myself I'd mingle a bit more.
Or, I'm going to grab another drink, but I really enjoyed our chat.
Simple but effective.
You're leaving on a positive note.
And maybe even leaving the door open for a future conversation.
But before we move on, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier. that whole idea of vocabulary and confidence.
Ah, that's a big one.
Because it's easy to think that having a bigger vocabulary automatically makes you a better conversationalist.
Right, but the guide dives deeper into that.
They talk about immersing yourself in the language,
Reading books, watching movies.
listening to podcasts, basically surrounding yourself with English.
And it's not just about passively absorbing the language.
Right, you have to be an active learner.
Look up unfamiliar words, use a thesaurus, even try writing in English.
It's like exercising a muscle,
The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
but building that confidence, it takes time and effort.
And let's be honest, it's not always easy,
We all have those moments of self-doubt.
especially when we're learning a new language.
The guide acknowledges that, and they offer some practical advice for dealing with that anxiety.
Like starting small, preparing those conversation starters.
It's like having a mental toolkit for those potentially awkward moments.
And remember, it's not about being perfect.
No, it's about connection.
Focus on listening, asking genuine questions, and sharing your own experiences authentically.
And don't be afraid of making mistakes.
They're inevitable.
And actually, they're often the best way to learn.
It's about shifting that mindset from fear of failure to embracing those mistakes as opportunities to grow.
I love that it's not about reaching some mythical level of fluency.
It's about enjoying the journey and celebrating the progress you make along the way.
But there's one more thing I want to touch on before we wrap up this part, and that's the power of mindset.
Yes, the often overlooked but incredibly important aspect of language learning.
While the guide doesn't have a specific section on mindset, it's woven throughout the entire book.
It's about approaching language learning with a positive attitude, with a belief in your ability to learn,
It's about embracing challenges as opportunities for growth.
and viewing mistakes as valuable lessons.
It's about shifting your focus from fear and self-doubt to curiosity and a genuine desire to connect with others.
Because ultimately, that's what language is all about, connection.
It's about bridging the gap between cultures, sharing experiences, and building relationships.
And that's a journey worth embarking on, no matter how challenging it may seem at times.
It's amazing, isn't it? We've really uncovered so much about English conversation.
It's not just about the language itself, is it?
No, it's this whole other skill set,
Almost like you're developing a new sense.
like you're tuning into all these subtle cues.
The way people say things, their body language.
It's a whole new way of interacting with the world.
It's really fascinating when you think about it.
And I love how practical this guide is. It's not just a bunch of theories.
Right. It's packed with things you can actually use.
Like real tools for building your confidence.
So as we wrap up, what are some of the biggest takeaways for you?
Well, one thing that really stuck with me is the power of observation.
Observation.
Yeah, like really paying attention to your surroundings.
It sounds so simple.
It is, but we often go through life on autopilot,
Give them all those little details.
Exactly. But when you start observing, you see conversation starters everywhere.
Right.
Like, that's a beautiful painting. What do you like about it? Or,
Yeah.
I've never seen a dog that color before. What breed is it?
It's about being present in the moment.
And engaging with your environment.
It's a great way to practice your English without even realizing it.
Totally. And another thing I'm going to try to do more is ask open-ended questions
Oh, they're so powerful.
instead of those yes or no questions that just kill the conversation.
It's the difference between just getting information and actually connecting with someone.
It's like you're inviting them to share their perspective, their unique view of the world.
Asking things like, what are you most passionate about? Or,
What's something you learned this week that really stuck with you?
you never know where those conversations will lead.
And the best part is it works in any language.
It's a universal principle of communication.
But speak of universal principles, we can't forget about active listening.
Ah, yes. The cornerstone of any good conversation.
It's so easy to get distracted, especially when you're trying to speak a new language.
Yeah. You're so focused on what you're going to say next.
Or worried about making a mistake.
But active listening requires you to be present in that moment.
And it's not just about hearing the words.
It's about paying attention to their tone of voice, their body language.
It's about truly understanding where they're coming from.
And when you do that, you create this amazing connection.
And you learn so much from each other.
It's a beautiful thing.
And while we've been talking about English conversation,
Right.
these principles apply to any language, really.
Absolutely. Language is just a tool,
It's how we connect as humans.
whether it's English, Spanish, Mandarin, whatever.
What matters is that we approach each other with authenticity and a genuine desire to connect.
I think that's the perfect way to sum it up.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into English conversation starters and strategies, I'm feeling so inspired.
Me too. It's been a great reminder of how powerful conversation can be.
It's a skill we can always be working on.
And the rewards are endless.
Thanks for joining us on this journey, and remember,
Keep practicing, keep learning, and most importantly, keep connecting.